So the format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcement, and coffee and snack break. And our main speaker, our first speaker for tonight is Steve G.
Hi, my name is Steve, and I'm an alcoholic. We got two Steves tonight. A couple of us came up from the San Fernando Valley, and thank you for having us. And this is me getting out of my comfort zone, speaking a little bit about my story, what it was like, and I'd like to thank the people that did invite us. I don't really know who that was, but thank you, Keith. So I'll briefly qualify, and welcome to the people that are new in Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date's December 3rd, 1996, and was not a day I chose. It was a day that I thought I was going to drink, and it didn't happen, and I was at the end of my road. It was an out-of-body experience for me. And how do I know when my 10 minutes is up? Okay, so give me like a warning, 2 minutes maybe. So I drank in the Valley. I got sober in the Valley. Born and raised in the Valley. And there's really good sobriety in the Valley. AA has saved my life. My drinking, it started, I'm going to tell you, I drank 20 years. 17 of the 20 years was very alcoholically. And in 1987, I had reached the peak of being able to have alcohol and a life. What I mean by that is I was able to hold down a job. I was able to have a relationship. I withheld commitments. I ascended at work. I had a union job, and it was a very good job. And I ascended in this job for many years whilst drinking. And then in 1987, I had reached the peak of my being able to have a life and alcohol in it. And from that point on, for the next 8.5 years, my life just went completely downhill. And I never thought about stopping. I was trying to figure out a way how I could have alcohol and fun in my life and have everything that I was used to having. And it was being taken away from me one step at a time. My union job was throwing lifelines at me. They sent me to my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was in a rehab, and I'm really fast forwarding through my story because I only have a brief time here. And that was the first time I heard that I had to not drink and not take anything that affects me from the neck up, and I did not understand that concept. And so that was my first understanding that I need to become more resourceful. How can I keep my job? How can I have alcohol in my job, because I cannot just abstain from nothing. And so I tried it my way, and I ended up getting fired from a job that was very difficult to get fired from. And my life continued to just spiral down the tubes. I can go through the whole thing, but the short of it is that I became unemployable. I became even more resourceful, very manipulative. I was living a secret life. I'll tell you, my union job was working in a grocery store, and I used to, like, these lights here remind me of when I'd walk in the door, I'd have to walk to the back of the store to clock in, and it was my walk of shame. I would have to go through all these different departments, and everyone would look at me and they'd give me this look, like you're not the same guy. You know, the same people that knew me all these years saw this guy changing. And that same thing was happening in my family. I wouldn't show up to any events. I wouldn't return calls. I was just living a life that was eventually had me very isolated. And alcohol had me, to the newcomer, alcohol had me right where it wanted me. I thought it was my best friend. It ended up a big cruel teacher and a big lie for me personally. And And still, I wouldn't listen. I went through several rehabs, and I had some all-expense-paid trips to county-run facilities. And it's still, honestly, in the book, chapter 3, Swearing Solemn Oaths, I would swear solemn oaths, and then left to my own devices, I was out of control. And for some reason, December 3rd, 96, it was 8 days later that I went into Alcoholics Anonymous once again. And I was waltzed in there. I was in a 6-month program, and I was allowed in that program to dump off some pretty disgusting habits. And I was in a lot of structure, and I was being kind of rebuilt from the inside out. And what I found out in this room and all the rooms like it is that my external bottom is different than maybe the guy on the House of the Hill that's, got millions of dollars, and here I am, this guy, just a nothing at the time. But the common denominator is that I felt pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That was my motivation to want to actually do something with my life and take accountability and be responsible enough to ask for help. Because to drink for me got to a point where I was going to die. And I got a sponsor, and my sponsor was just very non-diluted AA. I wasn't able to manipulate him. I wasn't able to tell him any ear candy like I'd been able to do my whole life to get away for as long as I did to drink alcoholically. And he asked me to get busy in Alcoholics Anonymous, to be of service, to go to meetings, to get into sponsorship, and work the steps. And here we are all the years later, and I could tell you my alcoholism, I haven't had a craving for a drink in a long time. Please let me know. But the alcoholism still is alive and well inside of me, that I have to watch my character defects, my shortcomings, my ego, my pride, and my coming up with an idea that I got this. And that's why I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I am not well, and I am trying to address any of those things through a spiritual path. For me personally, is a spiritual path to help me with my character defects, my shortcomings, because I cannot self-will or absolve them any more than I could the drink. And that's why I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, because otherwise the drink shows up in the back door. And I know that relapse is not an event, it's a process. And I stay very close to this program because I don't want to partake in that anymore. Because for me, once again, to drink is to die. Is my time up? Okay. I got how much? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So anyways, I love the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. What we do here in these rooms is it's great, but the before, the after, like a few of us went out to dinner before this meeting, had a lot of laughs. The fellowship, the intangibles of AA are a valuable commodity for me, to be able to have fun, to be able to laugh. To the new people, you hear it, we're not a glum lot, but there's a lot of fun to be had. And when I look back on my drinking the last 8.5 years, there was just, long before I had county-run vacations, I had built my own ceilings, my own walls. I had nothing to offer to anybody. I was nothing but a taker of life. And that's not how I was raised. That's not who I thought I was. But when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and really got into recovery, somebody was holding the mirror up to me and showing me, look at the stuff you did. And where do you want to go with your life? AA didn't care about really what I did as much as where I want to go. And what I want to do is stay sober, help other people, share to people that there's more to life than drinking. And for me, to drink is to die, and Alcoholics Anonymous has saved my life. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Now, our main speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Steve T.
Yay! Yay! Alrighty. Hey everybody, my name is Steve Tama and I'm an alcoholic. And I am standing. I took some notes of stuff that my friend Steve left out. Just a few things I want to share with you. First of all, thank you, Scott, for the nice welcome here, and thanks, Keith Gibson, for the invite. I'm not saying that it's like some empty, etiquette thing, because, and I may choke up a couple times here. I went to a therapist a couple years ago for a couple of reasons, and I said, I have this problem. When I feel gratitude, I get choked up. And I had two other issues, and we got into the other two issues and fixed that pretty quickly. And then he said, well, I figured out what the choking up thing is. And I said, what's that? And he goes, you're ultra sensitive. And I said, I want my $800 back.
I'm going to turn the light off somewhere. There it is.
It's my lovely assistant. I do think there's a future for our friend Mark, our literature guy. I'm not sure where, but where anything is loud, he's the guy, for sure. No, I really appreciate the enthusiasm. I love AA literature, and a little differently than Mark, but I do love it. So, and that's one of the points I want to talk about Keith for a minute. So I saw Keith come in. It's part of the fun. My sobriety date is September 20th of 1989. It's not my first sobriety date, but it's my most recent one. And I'm going to stick with it for the rest of today. Before I get into Keith, I want to welcome the newcomers, Daniel and Mark. We're really excited that you're here. I'm sure you're absolutely thrilled about it as well. I was very confused when I got here, and I heard a lot of different things suggested, especially from the podium. Welcome to the newcomers and all of this stuff. And it was all kind of overwhelming to me. So can I see I'd like to actually ask a couple of questions. How many folks here, if you can raise your hand, are you in your first year of sobriety? Excellent. Welcome. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And I have no smart-ass joke about that. We really are glad you're here. How many folks in here have over 25 years of sobriety? Okay, I'm especially glad you're here because you are the ones that I was watching. And a big part of it, let me take my joy juice here. I think a big reason, part of that was just that you were in the same seat. Like there was just people that I came to expect to be in that particular chair. And we've all seen people fighting over, hey, that's my chair. Us AAs can be so warm and kind. Anyway, I'm really glad you're here because you're the folks that gave me hope. And not everybody was this way, but for the most part, when I crawled back in here in 1989, I had first come into Cocaine Anonymous, which is really exciting. If you're looking to do all the crazy wrong shit and still stay clean, they somehow do that in CA. But I was drawn to Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict. But I needed the orderliness of Alcoholics Anonymous. And those folks with 25 years or more that were sitting calmly in their seat and were carrying themselves with a little bit of humor and certainly a lot of gratitude that was displayed by their calmness. I needed calm when I got here. I was living so crazy. I'm a musician by trade. I thought drinking and drugging was part of the job description. Wait a minute, it is part of the job description. But I've done it clean and sober all over the world, and it's even better that way. So anyway, I'm all over the place today because I got to come down here with my two buddies, Steve and my friend Sarge. Sarge is celebrating 1 day and 11 months today. One day he'll smile about it. And we got sober together in 1989, and I love these two guys. And my friend Tina, who I think may be stalking me, because about 3 seconds after Keith and I confirmed that I'd be here tonight, I got a phone call or a text from her. I'll see you Saturday. Like, is she looking over this guy's shoulder? Is she living with him? So I don't know how you found out so fast, but I'm really great to see you. We came in close to each other, and we got to know each other through H&I. If you need somebody for a panel, get Tina to speak on your panel. She'll tear it up. Anyway, so I got a lot of encouragement when I first came in, and I think it's the unconditional friendliness that was an attraction to me, and it kept me coming back. Also, somebody said early in my sobriety that the world's record for recovery was 24 hours. And that rang a bell in me, and I didn't even understand the depth of it at that moment, but I knew that it was something that I needed to file away and that I would utilize it somewhere down the road. Also, thank you, Nikki G, for the nice hello and welcome when we got out of our car here. All those little things add up. And anyway, the 5 minutes at a time thing helped me, and it still helps me. Can I see the hands of the folks that have already started taking my inventory? Okay, if you're looking for a sponsor, these are the honest folks. Ask them for help. So I heard a lot of suggestions from the podium when I was new, and a lot of cliches when I was new. Let's talk about some cliches. Think about a cliche that you heard early on that helped you. Anybody want to share one of those? Easy does it. Okay. Keep coming back, right? Sober is better. Right. Think. Yeah, in my clubhouse, they had that turned upside down. I'm not sure what that was about. Very good. Happy birthday. 16? 6. And Kimberly with 4? Right on. So the thing that about the cliches, I have a new cliche that I think is apropos in my journey, and it's not one you're going to hear in a meeting, but I think it's very real. And that cliche that I want to like hand out is, you are unique. Everybody in here is unique. We all have a different. What do they call it? Your what's the word for it? Your not your destiny, but what you're born with, what you're born into, what you are given when you get here as a human. And there are a lot of similarities amongst us alcoholics. Any drug addicts here? Okay, welcome. Really glad you're here too. Glad that was sort of allowed to be talked about when I came into AA, but anyway, that's a whole nother pitch. However you got here, whatever you were doing, I'm glad you're here today. Anyway, you are unique, and we all do have a little bit of uniqueness. I get to work my program, you get to work yours. Hopefully we learn something from each other. And more importantly, like one of the reasons I'm really tight with these two guys that came with me tonight was that we've done a lot of 12-step work together. We've done a lot of panels together. We've gone to a lot of meetings we don't normally go to just to go investigate it. And at the peak of Dave Sarge's sobriety, he was very active in all things Alcoholics Anonymous. And he had some circumstances come up in his life, some choices that he made that turned out not to be great, that were very big emotional challenges. And if you stick around here long enough, you're going to have that opportunity to grow up, and it's going to be very painful. That's what happened to me. I got here, fortunately, the drinking and the drugging part, once I had that moment of clarity that I was in fact an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I knew in that moment I was never going to be okay. It was never going to be okay for me. It was never going to work again. It had stopped working for almost 2 years. But since I'm so smart, I kept after it. I changed drug dealers. I changed the booze I was drinking. I almost moved to Ventura County. That'll fix it. Here I'm in the heart of the music business doing well, and I'm going to move away from it. That's some solid thinking. So anyway, we all wear our program a little bit differently, and I want to encourage you to wear the program that works for you with some guidance, because if I had to compose my own program, I wouldn't be here tonight. There'd be somebody else and nobody'd be talking about me or missing me, because I was not pretty to be around in the heart of my disease. But all of that's turned around in the last 36 years. And I think I saw a guy take a cake at a newcomer meeting a couple months ago, and he took a cake for 37 years. His name also happens to be Steve. And I wrote this note because I want to make sure I quote him correctly. He says, in his first 5 years of sobriety, he said, "I did not go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I did not take anyone through all of the steps, and I did not know of or pretend to connect with a higher power. And I am happily and gratefully sober for 37 years." Now those statements kind of go against the wisdom that we hear around here and the suggestions that we hear around here. But this guy happened to have, because of his work, he had legitimate reasons. He didn't make 90 meetings in 90 days because he's a sound mixer for TV and film. And he was mixing the show Friends at the time, which was #1 show in all of the world. And he was working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. So he didn't make 90 meetings in 90 days. He also it's not that he didn't want to try to take anybody through the steps, but in his first 5 years, nobody made it past step 4. He had 2 guys that were so deathly afraid to share their 4th step, they never did a 5th step, and they've disappeared, and we've never seen them again. And he also did not, he was afraid to say it back then when he got sober, but he was an atheist, and he remains an atheist today. But the 12 steps, he's figured out a way to apply the 12 steps without the God component that most of us grew up with. You know, and I got sober in traditional AA, and I'm really grateful for the foundation that I got in a 7 a.m. meeting. If you really want to be around the really twisted folks, go to a 7 a.m. meeting. When I found this 7 a.m. meeting, when I was directed to it, the guy said, "Look, 7 a.m. meetings are for people who are either really serious about sobriety or really sick." And I was both, so I fit right in. And that's where I met Sarge, and that's where I met Steve. Actually, we started at 6:45 meeting because we wanted to be a little cooler. It was a stag meeting. Anyway, so I come from a long line of alcoholics and drug addicts. There are also bipolar disorders, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia. Nobody in my family lived past 59. I just turned 70 2 months ago. And yeah, I can't believe it either. A child. It's all relative. Yeah, nobody made it. I mean, and they all had been exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. They've been given opportunities to sober up and clean up, and none of it stuck with anybody. And also, nobody in my family was raised by their parents. There was so much dysfunction woven through my lineage that nobody was raised by their parents, including me. I was raised by my grandparents, my mother's father and his second wife. And I just found out 5 years ago that I'm the oldest of 7 from my mother. And there's a couple of those kids, I'm not sure who their father is. 2 of them have already died from alcoholism. And on my father's side, which I just found out 5 years ago who my father was, I'm the 3rd of 7. And through 23andMe, I got to meet 5 of those 6 half-siblings. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was not afraid to pick up, that tool, which is your DNA test. And I said, I'll be happy to talk to anybody that I might be related to. Not remembering that my years of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, who knows who could have showed up in that. Because my buddy was the lighting director for Aerosmith. He designed their logo, as a matter of fact, and he found out that he had a daughter. When she turned 18, she found her father. And they have a great relationship now, but it was a bit of a shocker. I didn't even consider that was a possibility. Maybe I shouldn't really talk about this. So anyway, that's been an incredible part of my sober journey. And at the time, I went to my sponsor and I said, I found out I've got some half siblings, and I am half Italian. That side of the family is Italian. And all my siblings are attorneys or judges. So I wouldn't have fit in there anyway. But and ironically, my one brother, the one I'm close with now, he was the guy who was a judge, a district attorney in Miami in the 80s. So he was putting all the cocaine cowboys in jail. So I'm glad we didn't cross paths back then. But I was no gangster, believe me. I was just a piano player looking to get loaded and looking to get laid. So that's all different now, too. So anyway, I come from this long line of crazy folks, and so I was really deathly afraid of drinking and drugging. And I'm a classically trained musician. I started taking lessons when I was 3, but I didn't get serious about it until I was about 6. And it was that thing that I was utilizing that I discovered after I got sober, that I was trying to fill that hole in my soul, which I think we're all born with. And the way I filled that hole was I got a lot of attention, a lot of positive reinforcement through my music. And that's, I entered a lot of contests because I like competing. And I wasn't the best, necessarily the best technician on the piano. Most of those kids were really piano nerds. I mean, they didn't play sports. They never went out of their house during the day. They were hunched over their piano 5 or 6 hours a day. I was not. I was playing sports, and I was driving quarter midget race cars, and I was a well-rounded kid who was always busy. I was never bored as a kid. But the reason that I won contests is because other judges always say, his technique is not flawless, but he flawlessly feels the music. And that's what took me to opportunities like a scholarship to college at 13, going on my first tour at 16 with much older people who were drinking and drugging. It was 1973. You can imagine what went on then. And I just remember asking one of the older folks, I was 16, everybody else was 18 to 22 in that group. I said, should I try acid? And of course, everybody was looking out for the baby, And they said, well, make sure you're in a very controlled environment with people who really dig you. And that scared me right off of it. So I don't know what your experiences were with that, but I never got to experience that. Anyway, I was protected on that particular tour. While I was on that tour, a month after I went on that tour, my grandfather died at the kitchen table from his alcoholism. And what was weird is that I felt like I was not surprised when I got that phone call on the road. Because before we went on that tour, this group, it was called the Young Americans. It was 30 singers and dancers. And we did a show here in Los Angeles for all the families and the parents. And the kids were flown in from all over the country to audition for this group. I didn't go there to audition. I went to play piano for 2 girls from my choir in high school to audition for it. And the guy that ran that group, listened to them sing and said, thank you very much. Mr. Piano Player, will you stick around for a minute? And I stuck around for a minute, and he asked me what my repertoire was, what composers I had studied, and I shared that with him, and he asked me to play a few things, and next thing I know, I'm in the Young Americans, and I'm going on tour. Now, I don't know what my grandparents were thinking to let me go on tour at 16, but they gave me this great freedom of choice. They said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I really like this music thing, and doesn't feel like work to me. I really enjoy it. They said, well, go do it then. So I left school in my junior year. And I was very active in school. I was junior class president, actually, when I left school. So I was a very engaged guy with what was going on in my life, but the music thing just became my primary focus. And before we went out, we left in January, like the last week of December is when we left. So about a week before Christmas, we did a show here in Los Angeles at some high school auditorium. And I was the leader of a 6-piece band with these 30 singers and dancers, and my grandfather came up to me after that show, and he shook my hand. He'd never shook my hand before, never hugged me. He was always very kind to me and a very patient teacher, taught me a lot. But he said, "You look very comfortable in that position." And I said, "Yeah, I really dig this." And he goes, "I think you're going to do okay." And I know that his alcoholism is what, the minute I left town a week later, he was drinking. He was a periodic. He could go 8 months, 10 months, 15 months without a drink. And then wasn't home on time from work, and we knew the shit was hitting the fan. So anyway, I'm sorry that I never got to have an adult relationship with him, because I know that I had so much more to learn. Part of his problem, though, was he was a combat veteran from World War II. He got drafted when he was 30 years old. And he was an original member of the Teamsters in Detroit, where the Teamsters were formed originally. He was part of that original crew. So when he drafted him in the Army, they put him in charge of the motor pool in London. And they were doing all the everything that was coming in on the ships, all the supplies and ammunition. He would organize the trucking for that. And then the Army, in their inimitable wisdom, after 6 months of that, they put him into combat. And he had been promoted to sergeant at that point. Oh, good. Thank you. And anyway, he wound up getting shrapnel in his head from an explosion that happened near him, and he had a disability for the rest of his life. And I think he had PTSD when he got back from his combat. He was in combat 6 months, and he could no longer stand to be in a truck. He couldn't be by himself. He didn't want to be in the dark. Back then, they called it shell shock, and they expected you to get over it in 30 or 60 days. So that probably contributed to his dependence on alcohol. And anyway, that chapter of my life changed. I went out back on the road, finished that tour, and came back from that. And I, while I was on that tour, I was thinking about what my goals were going to be, and I set some goals for myself. That I wanted to learn how to be a conductor, and I wanted to learn how to write arrangements for orchestras. I also wanted to learn how to make records, because there were a lot of records that were life-changing for me. Like one of the first records I heard that affected me was B.B. King's The Thrill Is Gone. I mean, that record just drips with atmosphere. It's like, you listen to that lyric, you're like, man, this guy is going to kill himself. He's not having a good day. And that all was woven in such a beautiful artistic way that I said, I want to make those kind of records. And anyway, so there was a lot of steps I had to take to do that. One of them was getting a job with somebody that worked in Las Vegas in the main, back then they were called the main room. There was a house orchestra, and I got one of those jobs. Some of you might be old enough to remember The Tonight Show. Before Jimmy Fallon and before Jay Leno, a guy named Johnny Carson, who was the host, and the band leader was a trumpet player named Doc Severinsen. I became Doc's conductor and musical director, and every time he would tour, I was the guy playing piano, conducting 72 pieces. And I got to do that for Ronald Reagan's inauguration, so that was kind of a highlight. So I was in the midst of it and enjoying it. At 22 is when I started working with Doc. And this kind of ties into my life in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I told you about the two girls that they asked me to do them a favor and play piano for them to audition, and I got the gig. I was doing a singer a favor by playing with him at the improvisation, backing him up, and the guy that managed him happened to manage Doc. So here I am doing a favor for somebody for free, and I meet Doc's manager, and he and I become fast friends, and the next thing I know, he says, hey, you've conducted orchestras, haven't you? I said, absolutely. Eventually. Yeah, of course I have. Now, I'd only done a 16-piece band at that point, but what I did was, he said, well, Doc needs a new conductor. And this was a Tuesday, and he said, you're going to be in Cleveland with the Cleveland Symphony conducting for Doc Friday night. Can you handle that? And I said, oh, of course. So I got on the phone and I called the guy that I'd been thinking about studying conducting with. Found out he was in this is before cell phones or the internet. Found out his machine said, I'm in Vegas from this date to this date. He was there conducting for another artist. I got on a plane, I flew to Vegas. I brought Doc's book with me. Oh, the guy that I was replacing lived in Vegas. Went to his house in a cab, got the conductor's book, went to the hotel, met with this conductor, and he taught me Doc's show in 24 hours. And I worked with him for 6 years after that. So by lying my way into the gig. So aspects of alcoholism are not a bad thing. Sometimes you have to stretch the truth a little bit to get where you need to be. But I've shared with my daughters, I have one daughter that's particularly good at that kind of thing. And I warned her, I said, listen, I used to rely on that when I was your age, and it's a great skill set to have, but one you need to outgrow. So I admire your initiative, but you gotta be truthful, and you gotta be honest. And I've never had anybody refuse me when I've said, I'm sorry, I've never done this before, will you help me? So if you're new, please don't be ashamed to say, I need help. That's the key to Alcoholics Anonymous to me. That's the key that opens the door, and that once that door opens, there's plenty of stuff to learn here, and we're not keeping anything a secret. There's no secret handshake. There aren't a bunch of us meeting after y'all go home talking about how we're going to run things. It's all out on the table. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help somebody else. Those are not disconnected. Those are intertwined into our life. And I'm so grateful for the time that I've had at Alcoholics Anonymous. I started sponsoring a guy who was 15 months sober, and this guy heard me share and took every bit of courage that he had to come up and ask me for help. And he said, will you be my sponsor? And I don't know where this came from, but I said, I'd be honored. And he looked at me like, what's wrong with you? And I go, no, I'm happy to help you. And that guy I gave him a 35-year cake last October. He's still sober, and so am I. So this thing does work. Like I said, I knew I was going to kind of jump around a little bit tonight. I do want to tell you that if you're dragging your feet on getting into the action that we all talk about doing here, it's not hard to tell, I don't think, who's doing the work, because it winds up like coming out of you in your day-to-day life, and certainly in your AA life. For me, I had great sponsors from day one. I've had to change sponsors a number of times in 36 years. I've buried 4 of them. I had nothing to do with it. They were awesome guys. They were incredibly available, and they were incredibly open-hearted. They did not judge me when I brought them a situation, that was challenging, or that I looked bad, like I'd done something or said something that I regretted. They were non-judgmental. They told me how to work through it. They helped me see what I needed to see. I think a good sponsor is able to hold the mirror up for me at an angle that I can't do myself. Because I'm constantly assessing, how am I doing? Because I'm thinking about me. And it's not just because I'm an egomaniac. It's because I really do want to be better. The hardest place for me to be the spiritual guru that I want to sound like up here is at my house. And my sponsor said, if you want to find out how spiritual somebody is, ask their wife. So if you want to talk to Ansley, my wife, I'm happy to give you her number, and you can run it by her. She'll tell you the whole truth, because she knows all angles of me. But what happened for me in my first journey through the steps, and I just heard somebody say this about a year ago, and I couldn't figure out how to explain this, but she said it beautifully. Doug Rowell's wife, Carla Rowell. She speaks quite a bit. She's got about 40 years now. She said that her first journey through the steps happened by the time she was 11 months sober. And from that day on, her obsession to drink and use was neutralized. And I thought, what a beautiful way to describe it. She's not cured. She's no longer an alcoholic. It's just been neutralized by all this other stuff that occupies space in her brain. And I feel like that's what happened to me. The last time I seriously thought about a drink was, 21 years ago. I had just finished a big project. Everybody had been paid. I had a chunk of money in the bank. And I was driving home on a Friday afternoon, and my daughter was 7. My oldest was 7, and my youngest was 2. And I knew they were at a Bluebirds meeting that afternoon. And for some reason, I thought, the house is going to be empty. I could get loaded. See, I have to be vigilant when things are going my way. Everything was in perfectly good order that day. I just finished a big project. Everybody was happy. Everybody was paid. And my brain takes me there. And luckily, at that point, I probably had 10,000 meetings under my belt, and I'd probably heard 50 fifth steps from guys, and took guys through 9 and into service and into H&I and into phones at central office. That was all part of who I was now. And all of that recovery just kicked in. Like, what, are you insane? How could you even think that thought to throw this all away? So, but alcoholism is alive and well, and it doesn't matter how much time you have. It's all about what's going on right now, right here. Something happened to me when I was 8 years. I was coming up on an 8-year cake, and back then I used to try to plan the perfect pitch. And so I'm starting to think about my perfect pitch and all the meetings I'm going to take cakes at, and I knew that something was different, and I felt differently about things. And I kept praying about it and meditating on it and talking to other guys. Couldn't figure out what it was. I did my cake tour. A year goes by. I'm making up my 9-year cake pitch. Can't figure out what it is. Take all the cakes. Another year goes by. I take all my cakes for 10 years. And then I heard Johnny Harris speak. And I had heard Johnny many times. But this particular night, the one thing that he said that got my attention was, he said that he was most grateful, I wrote this down too because I don't want to misquote it, he was most grateful for something that he had previously never had. The one thing that Alcoholics Anonymous had given him was a quiet mind. And ding, I realized, you know what, I didn't even know what it was. That's how foreign it was for me to be calm and quiet. Because when you're in front of the orchestra, you can't afford to be quiet. When you're leading a band in a recording session, you have to be very direct and you have to be very focused. And I've learned through all of that and away from all of that, I can just be, I'm good. I'm good right here. It's good. And I got to spend a lot of time with Johnny later on. I got to talk to him about all this stuff. And he said he didn't know what it was either for a couple of years when he got it. So if you'd like to have anybody want a quiet mind, it is possible. I'm not sure how you get there, but certainly not drinking and using helps. Being of service, sponsoring people. A couple of things have changed for me since the pandemic. I had a hernia surgery on March 16th of 2020, which is the day everything shut down. I was one of 7 surgeries scheduled for that day at West Hills Hospital, and I was the first one that was supposed to happen. I got there at, I think, 6:15, and I was on the gurney by 7, and I was medicated. And then there was this huddle about 20 feet away from me with doctors and administrators and nurses and technicians. And it took about 15 minutes, and finally the anesthesiologist comes over to me, who happened to be a guy I helped get sober, who's giving me the shot. Can you hit me a little extra? No. And he goes, you want to go through with this? I go, what's the holdup? He goes, everybody else canceled. 3 of the other surgeries, the insurance companies canceled because they don't want their clients to get COVID. And the other 3 surgeries were canceled by the patients. They don't want to get COVID. I go, well, I already got this friggin' gown on, and you already hit me once, so let's just do it. As it turns out, the doctor discovered that I had a birth defect in my abdominal wall, which he would not have had the mesh material or the time to fix if he had those other 6 surgeries to do. So it's just lucky, and I'm always like, yeah, sure, let's go for it. Not always the best thing to think, but I'm glad I went ahead and went with it. But 2 days later, everything's worn off. The anesthesia's worn off. They gave me oxycodone to take, which I'm not going to take that. I took one, and it felt like I snorted about 1.5 grams a blow. It had the exact opposite effect on me. I was like a crazy person for about 3 hours. And then it wore off, and I finally fell asleep. But anyway, 2 days later, I'm desperate for a meeting, and there's nowhere to go for a meeting. But I'd had a couple of business meetings on Zoom, which nobody knew what Zoom was. And I called 3 of my buddies and I go, look, I know you guys aren't really morning guys, but I've been missing a morning meeting because I haven't gone in years, because I've been like on morning duty, taking my kids to school, making their breakfast, packing their lunches, all that kind of stuff, which I love doing, but it kept me from going to a morning meeting. So I'm thinking about a 7 a.m. meeting. I'm like, no way, we're not going to a 7 a.m. Okay, how about 9 o'clock? Okay. So I start this meeting, which has blossomed into this international meeting now with guys all over the world. And a lot of those guys come here for the South Bay Roundup, and a lot of those guys fly in for our San Fernando Valley AA convention. And that changed things for me in a big way. And, finally live meetings came back in. So my meeting schedule includes Zoom meetings and includes live meetings. But the reason I bring that up is because during this time, I've had a lot of different realizations, and one of the things that a bunch of us guys wanted to do was have a meeting that addressed very practical issues that guys our age and younger are facing in the real world, not just about being sober and clean. It was about how do you navigate all these situations that come up in your life. And I realized that what I needed to do was I needed my sobriety to be durable. I heard a guy say that he had learned a durable sobriety in our stag meeting, and I looked it up in the dictionary, and it says durable, able to withstand wear, pressure, or damage. For us, it's having the tools to get through it, whatever it happens to be. Problems, disappointments, love, hate, loss, resentments, anxiety, success, grief, family issues, work issues. Oh, hell, my issues have issues. So I need to have a durable recovery that can withstand the pressure and the wear and tear of that stuff. The other thing that I've discovered in the last 5-6 years is that I need a dimensional recovery. Again, I went to the dictionary. The definition is having sufficient depth and substance to be believable. I firmly believe, and I know to my innermost self, I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. And I need a recovery that has that same depth. Because my alcoholism and my addiction lives deep within me, and it finds very new and interesting ways to take charge. Anybody ever had their brain hijacked? Happens to me all the time. But luckily, y'all kick in, and I get this look from my sponsor like, did you really just say that? So, and I've learned to be okay with that tool. So for me, it means I trust the tools that I've been given here to walk through all of that stuff. In spite of my awareness of my weaknesses and my shortcomings and my blind spots, and believe me, at the ripe age of 70 and 36 years of sobriety, I still got them. Ask the 2 guys that are here with me tonight. They've seen all that nasty shit pop out. And they still said, yeah, we'll come with you tonight. So anyway, a person may be able to stay clean and dry, but that's not recovery. It wasn't for me. That's merely abstinence. I got clean and sober in June of 1986, showed up at a CA meeting, saw a guy that I'd been getting loaded with 2 weeks before that. He had 10 days. I thought, how do you get 10 days? And my first thought was, how do you get 10 days? This guy must know everything about recovery. And as it turns out, he did know everything that I needed to know that night about recovery, because before we left, I made a beeline for the door, of course, the minute the meeting was over. He goes, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. And he goes, what meeting are you going to tomorrow? I said, oh, they have meetings on Wednesdays also? He goes, yeah, we have meetings 7 days a week, and I'm going to come pick you up. I go, no, I'll just tell me where it is. I'll meet you there. So I met him there the next day. And but I never really got into the work. I got his sponsor, because his sponsor had a year, so he for sure knew everything about recovery. So, but I did not get into any of the core issues. And to me, and I'm going to close with this, the core issues are this. The first one is authentic identity. Until I know exactly who I am, how am I going to address it? So that's an ongoing process where I have a sponsor now that has 51 years of sobriety. He's a really interesting guy with an incredible, varied background and experiences in work and family, and he's a very spry 81 years old. I hope I'm that spry. And he helps me get perspective. He helps me identify my authentic self. It helps me identify what I need to work on. And the other thing is, and this is, I think, the most important thing for any of us that are sitting here tonight, I am personally responsible for my recovery. It's not up to anybody else. It's not up to my sponsor. It's not up to his sponsor. It's not up to the group. There's a lot the group can give me and bring me and show me, but ultimately it is up to me. If it is to be, it is up to me. And I can't do it on my own because I can't fix this with this. But with input from you and people like you who have the same honest desire, I can discover my authentic identity and I can be personally responsible for cleaning it up a little bit more. My hope for all of us is that we stay sober tonight, Daniel and Mark. Just make it to midnight or whenever you crash. Be patient with our others and ourselves. Be persistent in the pursuit of your goals and dreams. And give some love away tonight. Jesus, how hard is that? It will come back to you. In sobriety, anything is possible.
Let's give a big thanks to our two speakers, Steve G. and Steve T.